Killer Croc is not your usual glamorous DC villain who has solo films or animated series built around, but he has one of the most devoted fan bases in Batman's entire rogues gallery. His story cannot really be compared to the theatrical chaos of the Joker or the brutish display of power that we see from Bane. A cannibalistic sewer-dwelling reptile man is just so much more primal than any of them, and depending on where you first encountered Waylon Jones, he might be a freak with a rare genetic condition or a near-mindless beast lurking beneath Gotham streets. DC has reimagined him repeatedly across comics, animated series, and film, and each version says something different about what he actually is. As someone who is not particularly fond of crocodiles in general, but still fascinated by them, Killer Croc has always stood out to me. So let's take a dangerous ride through the sewers beneath Gotham City to know everything about this character's origins. But don't count on me to cover you in case you hear strange noises or see weird movements in the water.
Call me Killer Croc. Got that name on account of my good looks.
How was Killer Croc first introduced in comics? Here's where things might get a little confusing, so I will go over all the comic entries where Waylon Jones' life has been explored in detail. The main origin can be traced back to Batman number 357 and Detective Comics number 524, written by Jerry Conway. So let's take a look at those first. Croc appears midway through issue number 357, dressed in a green trench coat and with a giant hat covering most of his face. He does not talk much and merely observes how the Squid, a new contender for power in Gotham's criminal enterprise, demonstrates how hungry his pet squid, who is named Gertrude, is. Croc remains in the shadows, his face barely ever visible. Towards the end of the issue, we see Batman disguising himself to catch the squid red-handed, but he ends up with too many adversaries around. The Dark Knight then gets beaten and tied up, with dear little Gertrude just waiting to make an early appetizer out of him. He is thrown into the tank and a struggle ensues. Just then, we finally catch a glimpse of Croc's eye. Just his eyes, nothing else, and they are described as Ophidian. I gotta say at this point, I got shivers while reading the comic because we still did not know anything else about this guy except that his eyes had witnessed everything that other eyes, human eyes that is, could not. Anyway, Croc basically noticed how Batman was able to escape from Gertrude, who was robbed of her snack, poor thing, and he kept quiet waiting for the rest of the people to discover the same. The moment of truth was upon them and the squid found Batman's ropes floating around in the water without any other sign of him or his remains, considering what he had expected to see. So he immediately asked everyone to look for the Dark Knight. Croc, however, started moving in the opposite direction, remarking that everyone in attendance was a loser and he was not going to be a part of it. This led to a struggle and his hat came off and his reptilian face was out in all its sinister glory. Croc put on his hat again and set out. Deep down, he believed that the Caped Crusader was better than all of them, and almost on instinct, he looked up. Two pairs of eyes met each other and Batman too was shocked at the reptilian gaze of the man standing below him. But what puzzled him more was the fact that the man in the trench coat did not call out to his comrades, even after having discovered their target. Instead, he watched as Croc slowly advanced towards the old marina and then disappeared in the darkness of the night. While Batman went home to lick his wounds and ended up getting nearly discovered by Trina Todd, Croc later came back and climbed up an adjacent building, his face in full view this time, with his scaly long fingers grasping the railing as he climbed up. Then he loaded a sniper rifle and aimed at the squid in the building in front of him through the glass window. The first shot missed him by centimeters, but distracted everyone long enough to not zero back on where exactly the shot had been fired from. Squid took out his gun and fired at Batman, but almost immediately his vision started to go bleak and he screamed in disbelief. "It's not fair! I'm not finished!" With a single shot this time, Croc had managed to not only bring down the squid, but also the real squid in the glass enclosure behind him. When the police arrive, Commissioner Gordon and Batman get talking about who could have possibly fired the shot that killed a man and broke through the container Gertrude was in. In issue number 358, Croc appears again in his signature getup at the Gotham Tobacconist Club at night, making a commotion and screaming how no one should mess with him. As he is apprehended, he is warned to maintain decorum and show his face, or he will be dining with the fishes soon. What an ironic thing to say to a crocodile man, considering he probably dines on the fish, not with them. Anyway, Croc takes off his hat and his green, scaly, monster-like face goes on full display, shocking all the patrons. He points out how there is a very obvious power vacuum in Gotham's underworld, since Rupert Thorne and Tony Falco are both done with their criminal careers. He also accepts that he killed the squid and is now aiming to take over, with or without assistance. The scene then shifts to the coroner's office, where Lawrence Lohman, aka the Squid's body, is being examined. Gordon and Batman's theory of a special rifle being used seems more and more certain now, and the latter explains how he ran a comparison search on the bullet found on the scene back at the Batcave. As it turns out, there is just one weapon in the world that can fire a bullet of that caliber, and it is the Mark 8 Mannlicher Cobra, which was made by a Swiss manufacturer for the West German army. Batman points out how one prototype was destroyed in 1981, but the other two had managed to find their way into Gotham. The Dark Knight then hunts down Specs, a notorious gun dealer who gets knocked out and brought to the Batcave. Initially, he puts up a brave front, but as it becomes increasingly clear that he has no leg to stand on, he reveals that he sold the gun to the Croc, who lives up in the Point, and that is all he knows. Batman says how he remembers a strange man in a trench coat who had inhuman eyes and could have given away his location, but simply chose to disappear instead. The Robin then tells him about a group of people running a protection scam on the Sloan Circus, which Trina Todd had revealed to him after he had tried to damage control when she had discovered that Bruce Wayne was Batman. We then go back to the Croc as he is asked to explain if he has the brains to run Gotham's underworld. He sees that he is clearly being undermined, so he tells them that he will steal the Air Force computer made by Star Labs, it was the headline in the newspaper, and sell it to the right person for millions. He also says that he has been a freak all his life and has had to cut corners with men to prove himself, so he is not afraid of doing it another time. He hides under the car of Colonel Hardy as the latter enters Star Laboratory. When the soldier on patrol duty is asked to check the vehicle's muffler, he reaches out to hold the colonel's leg with one arm and yanks it away. He steals the man's clothes and ID and enters the building, but it soon becomes clear that he is not Hardy, as everyone tries to fire at him. He basically uses his strength to tear them a new one. Crocodiles are the dinosaurs of today, you have to accept it. That inhuman strength is simply prehistoric. Croc then shares a bit of his history with us, saying how back in Florida, he used to be a sideshow freak and had to fight with real alligators to entertain people. He would break those animals in two with his bare hands, and then he got smart and decided to use the hate people had for him to climb up in life. He was called Killer Croc back there, but he knew one day the people would call him king. He then steals the computer and promptly brings it back to the Tobacconist Club, as if it were just another Wednesday chore run for him. He is given a provisional green light to do what he wants with the criminal world of the city, but he warns the people not to double-cross him. As he leaves, they remark how he is a wild animal, but animals can be tamed and destroyed. Close to midnight, Croc goes back to his hideout near Hell's Point. As he enters his place and turns on the light, Batman greets him from the armchair. Enraged, Croc rushes at him for invading his home, and then has a pretty serious meltdown where he destroys the place by himself. At this point, I did feel a little bad for him because the way he kept saying, "This is my home, I built it myself, no one can call me a freak here," was quite tragic. He had built that place as a safe space for himself, and even though it was not Batman's intention to call him names or vilify his safe space, he felt violated just because someone else had discovered his hideout. He manages to escape by jumping into the treacherous waters below, where even the Caped Crusader cannot follow him. In Detective Comics number 525, Batman dives into the water with a whole lot of safety equipment, but cannot find any sign of Croc. As Robin arrives on scene, he even second-guesses himself, thinking that he had simply imagined the villain falling into the water. When he is hauled up, Batman realizes that his breaking inside the house must have triggered a psychotic reaction in the Croc, who had a strange fixation with his home. Finally, the Dark Knight concludes that the explosion at the house probably killed Croc, as it was a narrow escape for Batman himself. Just as he says this, Croc's silhouette appears from the mouth of the sewer, indicating that he is very much alive, and has managed to evade being caught despite being in the very same area. After a failed date with Vicky Kale, Batman's mind wandered back a few hours when he was looking for the Croc in the waters of Hell's Gate, and he suddenly remembered seeing a hazy silhouette with reptilian eyes. Cursing himself internally, Bruce rushes back and finally finds a footprint to confirm his suspicion. He follows its path and comes across 3 feeder tunnels with no more footprints in view. Just then, a creepy, scaly arm rises behind him and yanks him back. He once again says that he will take over Batman's underworld and used to fight alligators back in Florida, so a human being stands no chance. Batman somehow breaks free, seconds away from having his neck broken by the astonishing strength of the Crocodile Man, and again gets ambushed. This continues over and over as Croc manages to hide himself so well in the water that Batman is utterly unable to calculate his next move. The mental warfare goes on to the point where he starts to doubt himself and shakes a little, although he is not sure why he feels nervous. Croc takes advantage of this momentary hesitation and holds him in a death grip. To escape, Batman crashes into the grill, the force of the water pushing them both down. Croc manages to hold on, but Batman is washed away by the sheer force of the water and takes one last look at his enemy, sneering at him. He feels enraged because Croc probably thought Batman was fleeing for his life instead of accepting the fight head-on. In Batman number 359, the man negotiating with Croc earlier, who was revealed to be Filbert Hughes III, is paid a visit by the Caped Crusader and turned over to the Commissioner. In the meantime, all the little lords of crime had assembled at the reptile house of the Gotham City Zoo for an emergency meeting. Croc emerges from the shallow water, calling himself King Croc, exclaiming that he was taking over the power vacuum in Gotham's underbelly, and anyone who would challenge him would be killed by him. He says that he watched the Dark Knight drown in the sewers just the previous night, and everyone in the room feels a slight chill at his declaration, but still does not take his words at face value. They say that Falco is still the one running Gotham, and until he is out of the picture, they are not taking orders from anyone else. They all leave, and Croc sits on top of a crocodile floating in the water, and warns Slick that there will be consequences. At Gotham City Jail, two guards talk amongst themselves about how things have been quiet, with no attempts at breakouts, while Croc lures in the sewers. Talk of an impending disaster, right? He points out that there have been no breakouts, but they are not protected against a break-in. He steals a guard's uniform and makes it to Falco's cell, holding a knife. As the former crime lord's screams echo through the building, everyone rushes in to see what is happening, considering screaming itself is a very foreign emotion for someone like Falco. They find blood flowing out of his cell and his body twisted in a way that almost makes them throw up. Croc escapes easily, flinging away prison guards like they were insects, but one of them manages to raise the prison siren. In a jiffy, Batman appears on the roof just when Croc is making his exit, and the latter is surprised that the former is still alive. They exchange blows once again, but Croc throws his opponent with such force that Batman has to taste defeat for the third time. Commissioner Gordon catches up with him and tells him what he discovered about Croc's past. He was born as Waylon Jones 35 years ago at Tampa, but the kids would bully him by calling him Croc and telling him to go back to the swamp. Unfortunately, he suffered from a rare skin disease, which made his appearance look like said creature. His parents were not around, and he only had a deadbeat aunt who spent more time in jail than outside, so it was no wonder that he grew up to be a thug. Considering it was an earlier time when psychiatric rehabilitation was not a thing, he was sent to jail as a juvenile and suffered immense torture there. His records are sealed, so there is no way to know exactly what he went through, but he was charged as an adult for the first time at 16 while he was serving 3 years for robbery. A fellow inmate had made a gross remark about his face and was promptly killed by Waylon. He was given the death penalty, but fortunately for him, the Supreme Court declared the law unconstitutional, so he got life imprisonment instead. He was paroled after 18 years and then found employment at a circus, where he fought with real alligators and earned the moniker Killer Croc. He stayed with them for a while before leaving suddenly, and then killing the sheriff's deputy who had tortured him in a jail. Batman remarks that Gordon almost sounds sympathetic, and the man agrees because he has spent his life working in law enforcement. He does not excuse the criminal Croc has turned out to be, but he knew that Waylon Jones was simply pushed into this life. This is exactly what a lot of fans say as well, that Jones was not a criminal by choice. He simply had no other way to survive in a system where he was treated worse than an outcast. These comics serve as the most definitive origin for the character in the pre-Crisis original version of Batman Detective Comics. In issue number 523 of Detective Comics, February 1983, Croc makes a cameo appearance while the main story focuses on Solomon Grundy. This original material also ties Killer Croc to the deaths of Jason Todd's parents, but this was changed in the later continuity. How did post-Crisis continuity reframe his backstory? After Crisis on Infinite Earths, Croc's origin is refined slightly without repeating the events of the previous arcs that I have discussed till now. His story there was more about his acts as a criminal, and barely had a handful of panels dedicated to his earlier life, which explained the reason why he became Killer Croc. This is why I like his post-Crisis characterization better, because here, his past is given the emotional depth it deserves. If anything, this gives his journey much more substance. In Batman number 471, we see Croc waking up from a horrible nightmare about his time in the Arkham Asylum, where they were electrocuting him. In his dreams, he sees a creepy, ghoulish version of Batman, who is trying to use shock therapy to convert him from a criminal to an ordinary, law-abiding citizen. His Aunt Marcy wakes him up, reassuring him that he is with friends and out of danger. As she starts to sing him a lullaby to calm him down, the rest of the people point out that, despite his unstable tendencies, he is the one who found them their hideout and stole things to keep them safe. This comic made me see Croc in a very different light because he is still the same reptilian beast-like man who can break humans in two like it is nothing, but there is a much more humane side to him. He built the fallout shelter, stealing food from nearby delis and clothes and other supplies from department stores for people staying there. In fact, when a young boy talks to him about whether he really used to wrestle alligators, Croc asks him to call him by his name, Waylon, saying that is what his friends use. He also says how he never knew his dad and his mother died after giving birth to him. Aunt Marcy is actually revealed to be the grandmother of the little boy he is talking to, who takes care of Waylon as well, out of gratitude for him building a home for them. However, the other dwellers are not as nice, and they always keep their distance. One of them even plans to turn him in as soon as he finishes the place, but Marcy, in all her grandma fury, objects and says that Waylon is one of them now. As he goes into the tunnel to hook up the TV to a cable line, we see Batman making his way down, suspecting that Killer Croc might be behind the recent string of robberies and break-ins at various stores across Gotham. He finds the shelter Waylon built for the people and calmly asks them to explain just how they have been able to sustain underground, and Croc rushes in, packing a heavy punch at Batman. But Batman actually comes in peace, because the city planned to release new water pumps that night, and the people at the shelter were at risk of drowning. It is too late though, because the water rushes in, and Waylon offers to stay back and hold his home against anything, telling Batman to get everyone away on time. This is a nod to his fixation with having a home of his own that we had explored just a while back. Anyway, the water rushes in with such force that Killer Croc is unable to stand against it and gets washed away in the torrent. The people escape safely, but lament at how he sacrificed himself for their sake. Tearfully, Aunt Marcy starts to hum the lullaby she would sing to him, and all the other people start joining in as Batman looks on. In Batman Chronicles 1995, issue number 3, we again come across Killer Croc, except this time he is way more lethal and animalistic. He does not have even a single line in this issue, and even his design is extremely brutish, more suited to the reptilian side of him. It shows him escaping from the police in the marsh and then entering a goods train. He then gets off, jumps into another one, and lies in wait until the circus bull is forced inside the compartment. Croc is hungry by this time, so even if the bull puts up a fight, he manages to put it down and have a royal feast until the point where just the skeleton of the animal remains. He then jumps back into the marsh, letting up a beastly burp as he floats away in happiness with a full tummy. But if you think this was the creepiest iteration so far, you are sorely mistaken. Joker's Asylum Killer Croc number 1 is the stuff made of nightmares. It begins with Joker calling Killer Croc a misunderstood cannibalistic reptile man, possessing a gentle soul. It then shows Dr. Cross, a psychiatrist, talking to Croc in his cell, asking him questions about his past. The villain remains silent for most of it, but when he brings up his mother's death, Croc lunges at him angrily, looking way deadlier than any saltwater crocodile you can find in Australia. The doctor continues to interrogate him, but Waylon simply bites off his arms to escape the chains and walks menacingly toward him. Then the Joker says that the doctor kept begging for mercy until he was finished by Croc, presumably eaten, and the corridor is full of blood and flesh scattered around. Meanwhile, Croc has escaped and landed at the house of one Edgar Mason, who treated his wounds and then offered them to work together. Edgar works as a gun runner for Callahan, and he takes Waylon in. He and his wife Juliet treat him like family, talking to him, bringing him food and clothes, and slowly, Croc becomes less of a killer and more of a passive observer. With his help, Edgar kills Callahan and takes over his business. But greed knows no bounds, of course. He uses Waylon as his personal hitman, taking out rivals everywhere. Juliet, on the other hand, starts to have an affair with another man and manipulates Waylon to feel pity for her, claiming that her marriage to Edgar is abusive. Croc becomes soft-hearted towards her, which makes sense in retrospect. He never knew his mother and had a pretty bad relationship with his aunt, so when he finally found a woman he could bond with, he trusted her blindly. The issue explores his days with the family over the course of a little over a month. Juliet finally manipulates Waylon into killing Edgar, claiming he had hit her, and then betrays him when her lover shoots at him. She ridicules him at first, not believing that it would be so easy to get him over to her side, but when he kills her boyfriend, she once again cowers at his feet, begging for mercy. Her plea does not work, however, as Waylon kills her too. When Batman finally finds him, he speaks for the first time in the whole issue. The words he say are extremely poignant and reflect the trauma of abandonment he has been through so many times already. They're the monsters, not me. Put me back. It ends with Waylon being given a cell right next to the Joker himself, and this time he is muzzled and tied up to the point where escape is impossible. The thing that stood out to me is the last panel, where we see his muzzled face up close. His eyes, still reptilian, still deadly, still red, looked completely blank and disheartened. There was no trace of the anger and resentment so clearly visible right at the beginning when he was being interrogated by the psychiatrist. And I know that he ate and killed people in this issue, so feeling bad for him is certainly a weird thing, but I felt it anyway. See, he tried to be free. He tried to make it in the world the best he could and have a normal family that sits together for meals and talks to each other. He just wanted to be treated like a person and not a monster or an animal. And then he realized that his fate was sealed the day he was born, and even if anyone showed him kindness now, they were just trying to get something from him. So he voluntarily goes back to Arkham and sits alone in his cell, then stay outside and deal with the real monster. How did the New 52 retell his origin? Batman and Robin, Volume Number 2, Number 234, Killer Croc, September 2013, explores his New 52 origin in the best possible detail. Once again, kudos to the character design because Croc looks absolutely lethal here. Seriously, if that thing ever appears before my eyes, my heart will give out before I can even scream out. The story starts with the young Waylon Jones growing up in Crown Point, Gotham City with his Auntie Flowers. At this point, he still looks like a human child and just has green scales coming out of some parts of his body. His aunt tells him that since he is an orphan, there is only so much she can do for him. If he goes out with his lizard-like skin, he will not survive in the world, so he needs to scrub it off as well as he can. An older Waylon acts as the narrator, killing a SWAT group sent down to the sewers to apprehend Up, and says that atavism in humans can cause people like him to be born. The scene shifts again to 17 years ago in Jacksonville, Florida, where he is shown fighting an alligator under the name Killer Croc. A curious crowd watches on, pointing fingers at him, whispering how horrible he looks, even while he fights for his life at the hands of an actual predator. Later, a man comes up and tells Waylon to be gentler with the alligator, very aptly named Al, and hands him $40 instead of the agreed upon $100 that he was supposed to receive per show. He says that if he wants to get paid more, he should let the animal bite him a bit and show the audience some blood. As the man keeps taunting Waylon for how he looks, after a certain point, Croc simply bites his arm off. The next scene shows him getting apprehended by Robin while running a jewelry heist in Gotham and getting locked up as a result. Back in the sewers, only 2 SWAT agents remain alive, with their guns and equipment all gone. They come across a group of homeless people and urge them to take them back to the streets so that they can bring reinforcements. But unfortunately for them, the homeless people are all working with Killer Croc. In the narration, Waylon calls them "my followers," and says that he had helped them out when everyone else had shunned them, and he had taught them to survive and be crueler than the world out there. Croc kills both the SWAT members in a horrifying manner, and in a flashback it is shown how they were all dirty cops who had killed one of their own who had threatened to rat them out. He was trying to extort them, but since they had come down there to deal with him, Waylon treated them with his personal brand of justice. This comic takes a slightly more philosophical bent, as Waylon compares his own evolution into Killer Croc with how humans have evolved, saying that humans have an innate fear of reptiles due to herpetophobia. He points out how he had no other way to survive than to become a dreaded monster, because the people around him made him one. How was Killer Croc first introduced in animation? In Batman the Animated Series, we see Killer Croc for the first time in Season 1. In Vendetta, it all begins when Batman examines a strange-looking scale in the Batcave and finds that although it has a reptilian appearance, the cellular structure is entirely human. He later comes across as a big, oddly shaped creature who identifies himself as Killer Croc. The pair fight as well, but Batman finds out the hard way that Croc is much, much stronger than he is. Intrigued to know more about this mysterious man-creature, Batman goes down a rabbit hole and learns that his name is Morgan. But due to his innately animalistic appearance, he started a circus sideshow under the name Killer Croc. Eventually, he transitioned into a criminal and traveled to Gotham, but was arrested by the police thanks to the testimonies of the gangsters whom Harvey Bullock had captured. Batman realizes that it is imperative to have Killer Croc arrested in order to exonerate Harvey, so they have a final confrontation in the sewers. This leads to the entire structure falling on top of them, and Croc apparently passes out. When Batman comes out, an unconscious Killer Croc is finally arrested for good. In this retelling, there is no mention of his family or early life as such, and even Croc's appearance does not look very crocodile-like. If you ask me, he looks more like an orc with very large teeth and pointed ears. The show never exposes everything about him. It simply trusts the visuals and his few deliberate lines of dialogue to do the heavy lifting. It is a very simplified origin, but still an entertaining one. How did the new Batman adventures expand that birth? In this show, Killer Croc is introduced in the episode Love is a Croc, and it serves as a cruel reminder that even someone as powerful and dangerous as he should not underestimate a woman with passion. Where the earlier series had presented him as a large, powerfully built man with non-human skin, the 1997 redesign pushed him considerably further into genuine monster territory. His face was restructured, his snout more pronounced, his overall silhouette less human and more reptilian. If the Joker's Asylum comic explored how he was manipulated in the name of love and acceptance, this episode took an opposite direction and showed him to be the manipulator. It opens with Mary Dahl, a former sitcom star who is now attempting the straight and narrow as a hotel receptionist. However, after one rude tourist too many, she feels genuinely disheartened because people cannot differentiate that she is not playing a character all the time. She returns home and turns on the television, where Killer Croc's sentencing trial happens to be playing live. Croc delivers a compelling courtroom monologue about being a victim of society and being punished simply for the way he looks. This has Mary smitten with him almost immediately, because she can relate to him. She even visits him in jail, asking him not to lose hope. Croc is not receptive to her advances at all, and can you blame him? The man is supposed to be executed in a few weeks. But Mary is a woman with a plan, so she stages an ambush of his prison transfer vehicle and rescues him. Romantic, but in the most chaotic way. What follows is Gotham's most weird partnership. I will not call it dysfunctional, because, well, we have Joker and Harley as the reigning couple there. The two set up a home in the sewer. Croc simply wants money and absolutely nothing to do with the mushy stuff, so he just keeps using her as the tactical brain behind their crime spree, exploiting her genuine feelings while privately making his own arrangements. But Baby is completely infatuated with him, and this is the kind of woman they warn you about. Batman and Batgirl eventually track them down, and the climax takes a dark turn when Baby Doll discovers Croc has been sneaking out to clubs, meeting other women, and calling her the Little Woman, saying he will discard her as soon as she stops being useful. Hell hath no fury, so naturally, her response is to trigger a nuclear reactor meltdown and take down all of Gotham with them. This is perhaps a slight overreaction, but hey, grief does strange things to people. During the final fight, Croc even gets the upper hand on Batman, but Baby Doll intervenes and flips the narrative. In the end, she feels bad about their downfall, but she blames it entirely on Killer Croc for not being faithful to her. How did the Batman reinvent him? Every villain got a fresh coat of paint in the 2004 show, some more dramatic than others, and when Swamped introduced Killer Croc in Season 2, it was immediately clear that this version of Waylon Jones was something we had never seen before. Gone was the bitter ex-alligator wrestler with the unfortunate skin condition. What arrived in his place was something closer to a criminal mastermind. Croc formally introduces himself as Killer Croc, but you can call me boss. Here, he is not exactly a brute looking for a fight, but someone running a much bigger operation. The scale of his plan in this episode is somewhat unprecedented. This is not your usual robbery or some kind of heist. Croc has planned to reverse engineer Gotham's canal overflow pump system, which was originally designed to drain water into the bay during floods. By carrying out his plan, the city will be completely submerged. It is very cold and methodical, with not 1 ounce of sympathy for all the lives that will be lost as a result. His true origin is left deliberately ambiguous throughout the show, and I agree that this was a pretty unusual creative choice. However, it clearly worked in the character's favor. This deliberate mystery made him feel completely different from the Killer Croc we have seen so far. After all, fans of Batman have an idea about Croc's origins anyway from other sources, so this show focused more on what he could be and what he was capable of, instead of what he simply was. The one contradiction here was how Batman forcefully kept him underwater so he would pass out from not having air. You would think that for someone who looks that much like a crocodile and can summon those creatures to aid him, which is also something unique only to this version, he would be able to breathe underwater. How did Suicide Squad adapt him for a live-action film? This is the main live-action version of Killer Croc. By the time the film hit cinemas, Killer Croc had existed in comics for decades and had several animated appearances under his belt. Therefore, the job was not to introduce audiences to this character. It was to make sure that a live-action film could translate a massive reptile man to the screen without the whole thing collapsing into absurdity. Waylon Jones in Suicide Squad is introduced as a metahuman born with a genetic mutation that gave him reptilian skin, who eventually turned to crime and was chased out of Gotham City by Batman before being captured and recruited into Amanda Waller's task force. This is essentially the full origin the film gives viewers, and it is delivered very quickly without a lot of emotion involved. His past is gestured at rather than explored in detail. It is pointed out how his condition worsened progressively over the years, the reptilian skin spreading and deepening until it had consumed him entirely. The movie summarizes all of this in a very short time and moves on to the actual plot. Now, whether that reads as efficient or frustrating probably depends on how much the filmmakers wanted the audience to focus on this character. I would have loved a more layered and in-depth background, but I know that within the runtime restrictions of a movie with so many characters, that is a lot to ask for. The movie, however, does establish Croc's place within the squad dynamic for sure. The one thing that stands out to me even today is his reflection of himself, because of that iconic line, "I am beautiful." In every other version we have seen so far, Croc has been hyper aware of how he looks, and if he has not blamed himself actively, it has definitely been implied quite a few times. This is the only version I can think of where he flips that ugly, monstrous narrative about Killer Croc. It does not do a lot when the overall plot of the film is concerned, but it certainly adds a level of self-awareness. However, that being said, I agree with fans that this version of Croc could have been designed so much better. He does not really look dangerous or lethal, just strange. We were really hoping for the scary Killer Croc we had seen in some of the comics, and in that aspect, we were certainly disappointed. Where else did live-action TV use him? Arrowverse Killer Croc definitely looked the part. Some fans call him the green version of The Thing, but as far as capturing the reptilian features were concerned, this was not a bad portrayal at all. The show's actual take on the character is less a reinvention and more a reinterpretation. The real Killer Croc's tooth was discovered by a boy named Steven, who collected it and accidentally cut himself on it. As a result, it infected him and turned him into a kind of Killer Croc 2.0. His personality deteriorates in addition to the physical changes, replacing a normal boy with something feral and uncontrollable. Steven kills several people, then kidnaps a woman named Whitney and drags her into the sewers. He ultimately kills his own father when the man tries to save him from Alice. This portrayal earns its tragedy because it shows Steven on a sympathetic note, even as his humanity is being stripped away from him. As a Killer Croc story, this is a very minor tributary, since there is no origin to dig into and no Waylon Jones to actually watch. How does the Absolute universe reimagine Killer Croc? We see Killer Croc in Absolute Batman number 10, and it is shown that he and Bruce Wayne are actually acquainted. Bruce calls him Waylon Croc Jones when he almost attacks him. They were childhood best friends, and Waylon was later turned into a crocodilian monster by the scientists at Arc M. This design was absolutely amazing and so much closer to a real crocodile-alien hybrid monster. The most important distinction here was that Waylon was not born with a genetic condition. This is the version of Killer Croc that Absolute Batman establishes across its early issues, who was neither a monster nor a villain, but a normal kid who was put through something no one should have experienced. Across all these versions, Killer Croc mostly appears tragic, and at other times he is a low-key, heroic character, but the constant that is seen is how they all keep circling back to the same thing. Waylon Jones was a person the world decided was a monster before he had any real say in the matter. He does not fit completely in the anti-hero or straight-out villain mold, and maybe DC keeps reimagining him because there is clearly more to say about him. As I said before, he does not have the charisma of the Joker, nor the powerful aura of Ra's al Ghul, but that does not mean he is in any way less deserving of the title of being one of Batman's greatest villains. Do you agree? Let me know in the comments below which portrayal of Killer Croc you liked best. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel, as it is a passion project, and I really hope it reaches more enthusiasts like you.